Everybody. Welcome to the webinar today. This one's entitled RM and Microsoft, How Customers Are Embracing the Cloud Platform for Remote Teaching. So welcome to everybody. Short introduction. My name's Jake Mallander. I'm the Head of Key Account Management here at RM. We look after a lot of our existing customers. Many of you are on the webinar today and have been on previous webinars and events that we've run over the years. So welcome to you and thank you for attending today. Also, we've got some customers that might be new to these events, new to RM, and are here for the first time. So welcome to you all too. We really hope it's going to be a useful use of your time today. So a lot has been made of the current climate, and I've touched on that in previous webinars. I'm not going to do that again today because I think we're all pretty much experts now in how difficult and challenging things have been over the past few months. But what we do know is that cloud technologies continue to play a really important role in schools and more widely as well, and will continue to do so in the years that follow for many reasons, not just related to school closures, lockdowns and COVID-19, but there are also a huge range of benefits that you've all experienced and we've talked about in previous webinars so far. This is actually part 3 of our series of webinars. We ran a session yesterday as well, and that was more of a Google flavored webinar. In part 1, though, going back to April, we gave you hints and tips on using Microsoft Teams to support teaching and learning. And that was more of an RM specific kind of event, and we had our own experts along for that to talk to you all. In part 2, we went to the next stage and we involved the experts directly from Microsoft to talk to you in even more detail about getting best practice out of Microsoft Teams. And following your feedback, today's webinar is more customer focused. A lot of you have asked to hear from existing customers about their journey to the cloud, and today we're delighted to be joined by Trevor Taylor. Trevor's the Chief Operating Officer at the Constellation Trust, and Trevor and the Trust have been using Microsoft Teams, and they're going to talk to us about really their experience of that, particularly in the context of the past 3 months. So more about that in a moment. As I said, this is part 3 of a series of webinars. Many of you have attended those previous webinars before. If you haven't, I just wanted to point out at this early stage that you can have access to recordings of all of those webinars. They're available on our website, www.rm.com/seminars. We're going to put a slide up at the end with that detail if you need to scribble that down. I've been asked to mention that, as always, there is a chat box in the bottom right of your screens. Some of you are engaging with that already. We can use that right through the presentation today and right through the session. I can see some of you are engaging with it already. That's great. Perhaps someone can just type in a message to check that everybody can hear me okay. Let's see if the chat window is working. Great, okay. That's always comforting to know. So the purpose of this chat box is for you all to submit any questions. So we're going to move on in a moment to kind of the main presentation, where I'm going to ask Trevor some questions about his experiences, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A towards the end of the webinar, where you get to ask Trevor as many questions as we can fit into that time period. We've also got Darren Baber along with us as well, and I know many of you know Darren. He's our Principal Support Consultant for RM Education, and is said to be a bit of an expert when it comes to Teams as well. So if there's anything that's more about Teams from that point of view, then we've got it covered today. I think that is everything in terms of the introduction. I think all that remains now is for me to introduce formally Trevor Taylor. As I said, he is the Chief Operating Officer at the Constellation Trust. Trevor, are you there? Can we see and hear you? Yes, we
Good
can.
morning.
Trevor. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I can take it you can hear everything loud and clear at your end.
I can, yes.
Thank you. Great. So first of all, as I said, thanks a lot for joining us. I know you're really busy at the moment, like most of the education world is right now for many different reasons. So we really do appreciate you taking the time out to join us and give us this useful insight. So Trevor, I think we're going to start with just some background questions to kick things off. I think everybody would find it useful just to understand your background and a bit more about the Constellation Trust, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Well, my background is 30 years of art teaching, and then I moved into the role of Chief Operating Officer about 5 years ago. We run a medium-sized trust in Hull, Constellation Trust, and we're a mixed trust of 2 secondaries, 1 PRU, 6 primaries, soon to be 7 primaries. The trust was formed in 2017, but we've been working with RM since 2009, and the relationship has, developed along that journey.
Okay, and I think you talked earlier on that you were originally part of the BSF program. Some people might remember that.
Yeah,
Were you involved back then? And if
I
so,
was. Yeah,
what's some of the background to that?
I went through the whole of the BSF program, responsible for the building itself, and working with RM and the solutions architects to put in the network, which seems like a long time ago now. We ran the whole of the RM contract through to the end of BSF, and then we were in a position where we needed to continue with a contract. So we speed dated a number of IT companies, which was very revealing. And RM were by far the most outstanding in the education sector. They have the depth of knowledge that's needed for education, rather than just being a business IT company.
Okay, and what were the main things that stood out from that point of view?
Um, they understand what schools require. They understand the safeguarding aspects. They understand that when we arrive in the morning, the network needs to be up and running, and there isn't time to fix it. And so, as we moved on to the flex contract, and RM India were brought in, which to a lot of people sounded quite crazy at the time, but it gives us a 24-hour wraparound service. So when we're sleeping, they're working on the network, fixing things, and importantly, pushing out software, which originally was pushed out during the day, which slowed the system down. But now all of these things are managed at night,
Yeah.
by RM India.
Okay, that's great background. Thank you. I just wanted to capture your background and how you came to be working with RM. Just thinking about the past few months and thinking about the challenges really that the whole of education in the UK has been facing for the obvious reasons. What was the situation when the lockdown was announced for you at the Constellation Trust, and what were the main challenges that you faced?
So we'd already benefited from the BSF program, so we had a building that was fit for purpose. And in the summer of 2019, we were fortunate to have a substantial investment in refreshing part of that technology. So we were aware that Windows 7 was coming to end of life.
Yeah.
and we moved everything over to the Windows 10 platform prior to January of 2020. And this went quite seamlessly. We thought we had a super system working, and then of course the COVID hit, and we were then in a position that we needed to change our working practices quite radically and quite quickly.
Okay, and in terms of how you reacted to that situation, what do you think were the kind of top challenges that you faced, especially as a multi-academy trust? That must have been
Well,
quite a challenging scenario.
everyone has a range of staff who are either digitally literate or not, and people in the real world, who have laptops that have been in bags and never seen the light of day, don't quite understand that they need to be logged onto the network to have the updates applied. And so the first part of this was to actually get everybody to the same page with their laptops, making sure they got laptops, and that was irrespective of whether they were laptops or MacBooks, because it works in exactly the same way.
Okay, so some challenges there with individuals. Did you face anything in terms of the teaching staff across the trust? Were there any challenges that you faced there that you could share with us in
Well,
terms of getting them on board in this new
yeah,
way of working?
yeah. I think one of the key things is whoever the person responsible for teaching and learning in the school, they do need to have some charisma, because to actually get people to do this was a real challenge. And we found that some of the more mature staff actually took to it easier than the younger staff.
Oh.
But we also found that the people in leadership roles found it difficult to actually, ask how to do things, because they were about the management and the running of the school, but all of a sudden they'd been thrust into the same position, and I don't think anybody comes into teaching, well, they'd not come into teaching until now with this thought of actually doing digital online learning. And so it was it was completely a new world. And just to, record a lesson presented challenges, mainly because it challenged people's confidence. They were confident in teaching, but the actual confidence in teaching and operating a system at the same time was a real, it really did present some challenges. And so one of the things I suggested was that we had, I made all sorts of suggestions how we could get around this. So you take the person that you'd least likely to think that could operate teams, and get them to do it, because then everybody else will follow.
Yeah.
Running things like lockdown quizzes, just to get people familiar with actually using the system. So it's about where to click the buttons, which buttons to click, and then how to stream it. So these were challenges that we faced, and there was no real this is how to do Teams as such. It was completely new, and we were, it was experimenting, it was change, and people don't like change. And I think we've embraced it now. I think we had a sticky sort of week or two when people were feeling less confident, but given the mammoth amount of paperwork that was being sent out to children in terms of homework, work, various projects assignments. This just must make it easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely sounds like it has done, and some really good ideas there around getting teachers on board within that change period. Just thinking about taking a step back and looking at the decision you made to go down the Microsoft Teams route. Did you consider a different platform, and if you did, why did you make the decision that you did?
So we had, excuse me. So we had two options. We had Zoom and OBS. And let's
Right.
say the more advanced users advocated the use of Zoom and OBS, basically because they thought it was an easier platform. And then they started to talk about streaming OBS into Teams, and it all got quite messy. And we were dealing with people who were not advanced users. And so the reason we moved to Teams was because of the security aspect, the
Right.
safeguarding aspect. And we then made it a trust policy that we would use Teams. And that was for everybody, which made life much simpler because you had different staff trying to do different things with different systems. And it just didn't work. It just needed to have one system and one way of working.
Yeah. And what is it about Teams for the benefit of our audience today? What have been the main benefits for you within the Constellation Trust? What are the things that have stood out that you've been pleased with?
Well, we're fortunate to get the DFE funding for the extension to the cloud.
Great.
We've been able to do remote learning, so we've done remote learning. It's been really useful for meetings because meetings start and finish at an allotted time, which is a bonus. We have done staff briefings. We've done virtual CPD.
Yeah.
And it's got you can either do it like this as a live webinar for people, or alternatively, you can record it and send them a link and they can watch it at a time which suits them. And particularly parents with, kids who they're trying to school at home and juggle teaching around. That was a real benefit, that people could just sit down and do it anytime they wanted. They could do it on a phone. They didn't have to have a laptop. So there was an awful lot of benefits really when you actually think about it.
And to be balanced, are there any things about that platform at the moment that you're still kind of getting to grips with, or perhaps you'd like to see some improvements in?
There's very little now at this point that we're 13 weeks into it.
Yeah.
That Teams doesn't really do that Zoom does, except the number of screens. But balance that off with how many actual screens do you actually want in front of you, because by the time people get to the size of a postage stamp, it's worthless having the video element. So as far as I'm concerned, Teams is the platform that we'll continue to use, even though it's advocated by different people, by local authorities use Zoom. I know that there's safeguarding meetings that use the Zoom platform from councils, but reality is Teams is secure, and that's really important for us.
Yeah. Okay. That and you've touched a couple of times on safeguarding, both around the use of Teams and the consideration you gave for other platforms as well. Just generally with this new way of working, have you found that you've needed to develop or change your safeguarding policies in any way, or bring about new working practices there?
We obviously have put out a document for people to make them aware of just simple things like blurring your background,
Yeah.
making sure that there's two people in the room if you're having a one of the face-to-face meetings with children, and that people use it sensibly. They wouldn't do anything that they wouldn't do in a classroom. It's the one of the biggest challenges has been probably parents feeling uncomfortable doing it. There was an element of that, but we allayed that fear by explaining why we were having to have these meetings. So we've done a virtual transition with every child, of which we've got 290. So we've done 290 video meetings with the new year sevens, just so that they can feel comfortable when they come to us, because we're not having transition week.
Yeah.
And we felt it was important. We also did a virtual tour of there's a virtual tour of the school,
Right.
so that when they come to the school, it's easier for them to know where they are.
Yeah. Great. And is that those two things, have they happened then, or are you in the process
Yeah,
of
no, they've
doing those?
happened.
They've happened. How have they gone then? What's the reaction been like to those
The
from
feedback,
pupils, teachers?
I think the feedback from parents has been really appreciative,
Yeah.
because of I guess the confusing messages that we've been given, and now the message that we've been given is, well, basically, you get on with it, you sort it, and so we've been as creative as we can be with the tools that we've got. So the way that I look at Teams is, being an ex-art teacher, I just look at it as, well, it's another pencil crayon in your box. It's a tool that you can use. So, and it's phenomenal technology. So to actually be able to, have meetings with students that are joining us, virtual tours, all of those things, they're really important. And, you can post them on your website, so that no one feels left out.
Yeah.
And particularly around safeguarding, there are a lot of concerns of a lot of children lost out there that there'd been no contact with. So we've managed to make contact with people through Teams, and that's been really important.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Trevor. You also touched on, and I just wanted to understand the actual delivery of lessons through Teams. I think you mentioned that you've done some of that.
Yeah.
Has that been within the primary schools, the secondary schools, or across the board?
It's been across the board.
Yeah.
I'm based in secondary school, so I can give you that sort of experience. The main thing is that we use Progresso Cloud School as our MIS. Now, the interesting thing about that is that when the information is drawn from the MIS as the single point of truth, if you are logged in as, if you are registered as Mr. Taylor, it will bring up your display name as MT. Now that causes a little bit of a problem, because for years RM had carefully made sure that all our display names were, for example, me, I would be TT. So it was much easier to find people than trying to find Mr., Ms., Mrs. So that's the thing that you need to watch for, that because there is no single fix to it, or there is no group fix to it, you have to change that in Unify yourself, which is a 2-minute job, but it makes finding people on your email address book much simpler.
Right.
Then the next challenge was classes. So actually importing and creating classes, that's a key role, and that needs to be done by somebody who has a technical background.
Right.
So the person that runs your MIS, working with the RM on engineer on site, that
Yeah.
will create your classes, and then from creating classes, um, basically you have access to those students, and it's very much up to them whether they log in or not.
Uh-huh.
But that's the only bit where Teams slightly falls down, insofar as you, of course, you can only see 9 at a time.
Yeah. No, and that's that's good. That's that good kind of balanced view, really, of the platform. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. And just on the teaching and learning side, a question we got asked yesterday was around how you bring about quality assurance when you're delivering lessons, away from the school buildings.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've experienced or thought about, or have any processes
Um,
in place for?
well, we've done it in two ways. To make sure that the leadership team are on board, they were all instructed to make a video, and that would familiarize them with Microsoft Teams. Because if we can't do it, the expectation of a member of staff doing it is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
We then moved to asking staff to create a lesson, and they were asked to create a single lesson to begin with. That was quality assured by curriculum leaders, and once curriculum leaders had, checked it out, it was released. But what we've got to remember is, we're all professionals, and we're all like to think that the lessons that are being produced are quality lessons, and
Yeah.
within the parameters of the teaching and learning framework.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. Moving on to kind of lessons learned, really, things that you would share with other people that are attending today, or might listen to a recording of this in the future. What kind of things would you pass on to other schools, multi-academy trusts that maybe aren't as far along the journey as you are at this point in time?
Budget is always a consideration, and maintaining an estate of modern devices that are up to speed, with up to date software, is absolutely key. We have had a situation where you could not run Teams on Windows 7. It
No,
just would struggle. So that the investment that we fortunately put in last year was important. We know who we can rely on. So in terms of RM, I can't really think of an occasion when I've said to one of the on-site engineers, how can we do this? And they've turned around and said no. So they've
that's good
actually
to
gone
know.
away. Well, they've actually gone away, and if they didn't know how to do it, they found out how to do it, or it's being done again by remotely in India, and or it's been done by one of the solutions architects
Yeah.
at RM. And we've always, it's building the relationship with the on-site engineers. We do have a very strict call logging system, which we like to
Uh-huh.
stick to, so it can be triaged, and the actual engineers, have the list of jobs that they need to do in prioritized order,
Yeah.
and making people understand that is quite significant. Um, and um, we we just wanted to, have a good team around us, and it is about the relationship. So I meet with Simon Ball, who's our relationship manager, and we talk across a wide range of things. I get a report on the update of every school, a printed report which I can take to the board of directors. They can actually see what RM have done, which is quite useful because me saying RM have done whatever to the board of directors sometimes is a different language, and actually being able to show them and give them the time with papers to read, and just the knowledge that you can sleep at night when people are working in the background in another time zone.
Yeah.
And you walk in the morning, you push the button, and everything works, and that is peace of mind.
Yeah. No, good advice. And in your in the case study that we'll talk about at the end, we'll point our delegates at that. I think you talk about the importance of business continuity, especially over the past few months. Is that something that you've got any detail on for us?
We just had to have, but the continuity of knowing RM, the continuity of working with all the partners that feed into RM. We run everything basically. RM is like the glue that sticks it all together, really, because you couldn't have a cashless payment system without running it through the network. So all of everything that feeds in is important, and everyone, it works. We've made it work, and it's not. When I say we've made it work, I don't mean we've laboriously had to make it work. We've come up with a solution to make things work.
And then final couple of questions. Just thinking about the future, really. We're hopefully going to go back to some kind of normality at some point. What are your hopes, and what are the Trust's hopes for the future? And really, what have you learned over the past 3 months that you can take into the future?
I hope that people will embrace the technology. They won't discard it. I think we'll live in a very different world. If there are local lockdowns, we're now in a position to actually push lessons out to pupils quickly, without all the the drama of actually getting it to work. I think we should be more creative as schools. So we spend an enormous amount on school planners, for example, and every child has an Outlook account. They're not going to go into the world of work and hug a file and carry that around with them, because the reality of it is they're going to actually do it on the phone. We banned mobile phones about 8 months ago, and looking at things now. Maybe that was the wrong move, but it was the right move at the time, and so I think there'll be a possible revisiting of that, because if you want children to engage, providing them with some paperwork is not going to engage them. Providing them with like, for example, a diagram of the heart. Because now I can pick up my phone, I can call up a diagram of the heart that's live, pulsating. I can pull it apart in 3D. That's the world that they live in, and they engage and walk around attached to their mobile phones. So I think we're not very good at teaching children the benefits of probably the most powerful device that they'll hold in their hands. And that, be it from a calculator to GCSE pod. We expect them to use GCSE pod outside the classroom. But when it came to lockdown, if you've got several children in the house and one laptop, the benefits of at least one child having a mobile phone meant that at least two could be online. So the thought about how technology is used, I think, is going to be a really important key aspect. I think everything has happened at warp speed in the last 12, 13 weeks. And I went to bet just over a year ago, and there wasn't anything that was particularly new, particularly interesting. And I think what this has done is this has catapulted us forwards probably 3 to 5 years and provided us with a platform now that, if it's used in a creative and inventive way, I mean, just doing a science lesson, a practical science lesson online, it takes away the health and safety aspect of it, but it provides the visual aspect of it. And, now, if I want to know anything, you Google it or you YouTube it. And children are the same. That's their point of, that's their source of contact. And I think this has been the silver lining for this is that we have the technology in place now. And I think the government has realised just how far behind we were, and provided some of the tools to move forwards, but also made us maybe rethink what a classroom looks like. And I don't mean in terms of social distancing. I mean in terms of, will exams move to online exams? Would it be easier to submit a digital sketchbook? Would it be easier to submit an electronic assignment? These are all things that I think people need to start to think about moving forwards, particularly in a post-COVID world.
Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, there's some real food for thought there, Trevor. Thank you. And I think two things I took away from that was around the feeling that you've catapulted yourself into the future somewhat because of the difficult circumstances you've faced, and I'm sure there'll be others that feel the same way. And just interested to hear you bring up the controversial topic of mobile phones as well. I'm sure different schools have got different views on that, but the fact that the past couple of months will have caused people to rethink things like that is interesting as well. So I just wanted to thank you for answering those questions. Sorry if I put you on the spot a few times there, but that was really insightful, and I'm sure everybody will agree that's on the webinar today. Is there anything else or any questions you think, why didn't he ask me that?
No, I don't think so, really. I think the main thing is you've got to have a driver. That's pretty obvious. You've got to have someone that likes using technology, and don't make it dry with English, maths, and science. Look a little bit beyond those boundaries of academic subjects. Think about how creatively you can use it. I think I think we're getting to the point now where people are, let's say, in the comfort stage. So they're comfortable creating a webinar, but they're not. But the next stage is, okay, right, like now let's take it to the next level. How creative can you be with it? Because you need to engage children. That is your job. And if you don't engage children and you pump out more paperwork, it's not going to be a positive outcome. And I think having this and tying it into tying it into other kinds of technology, we can move forwards. And I think it's quite an interesting time. I think it's like almost like a new start. And I don't think it's teachers are now gone and out the window. I think it's about how teachers use this time and also save a lot of time. Because once you've done this, you've got this forever. So you can, you've got like a set of lesson plans. You will have a set of Microsoft Teams videos that you can share and use each time. You can improve on them. And if anyone tells you it doesn't work on a Mac, let me assure you that I do my Teams meetings on an iPad with a keyboard. Works perfectly well. I'm sitting talking to you on an iMac now, and I use Microsoft Windows at school. So it works. It works on any platform.
Great. That's comforting to know. I know a lot of people grapple with different types of devices with different platforms, so it's good to hear that that's working well for you. And I think this is a good time to move into the Q&A now. I think we've covered some really interesting topics there. Thanks again, Trevor. So we're going to have the questions put up on the screen, and I'll try and direct those. We've got Darren as well with us, so we'll try and work out who's best placed to answer these. Question from Rob Halls: do you have many staff without a laptop computer at home? And how do they manage? And I think you did touch on that briefly with the example of the household with just one device. Do you have any without?
No, every member of staff has a laptop that they can take home. And in terms of using an iPad, like I said, I do all my weekly meetings normally on an iPad with a 20 or 30 pound keyboard attached to it. And I've been able to operate and work from home for the last 13 weeks doing that.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there any way in Teams to do a more open meeting too, like Zoom, where participants can be sent a code to join, or must they all have an individual logon and use a different platform for more open parental information sessions? Now, Darren, you might want to chip in on this one as well. The kind of comparison between Teams and Zoom.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thanks, Rob. And I think there's been some chatter already, and Janine has been answering a few questions I see online. So thanks for that. So with Teams, you really need to use. You can invite external participants to your Teams meetings, and you can do a live meeting if you like, where those people are just sort of watching the event live. That needs a different license in Office 365. I think that's A3. But when you invite external people, you really do need an email address to invite them. So there's no sort of open code like you get in Zoom to just give that code to anyone. You do need to invite the participants through an email, so that they do need that to come in. So
I think the other thing as well to be aware of is we have a sixth form, and the chat in Teams wasn't facilitated. So it was about when we moved over using the DFE license, chat is not enabled in that license. So we had to modify the tick box to allow chat for sixth form.
Okay, you mean in the security settings in Teams? Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, I guess there's a sort of, if it was through DFE and the RM sort of setup of Teams, then yes, we would lock down things like chat just to stop it becoming a WhatsApp platform for the kids really to take advantage of. And so that's locked down. And then, as you say, you've then got the options to go in yourself and make those changes to open it up for those you can trust. So,
yeah.
Okay, question from Lisa. Has there been a difference in how your secondary, primary and PRU sites have responded to embrace remote learning? If so, what have been the key differences and how have you supported these?
Okay, so the thanks, Lisa. The secondary sites, they've all been put in the position where they've done face to face, they've done online webinars, and literally taught live lessons. The primaries have used it as well to teach recorded lessons and some live lessons. And the PIU, I would say, have used it more for the recorded lessons because the PIU's been closed during the lockdown, except for the extremely vulnerable children, and those are key workers. And the response has been positive. We've got parental surveys that we've carried out, and the response has been positive from those that have engaged. I'm not pretending that engagement has been 100% by any stretch of the imagination. We're probably looking at in the region of between 30 and 40%. And that then prompted us to seek out how we could actually contact those that have not engaged. But some of that goes back to what I was talking about, where the DFE laptops haven't come through until this week. Use of mobile phones, and large children, families with more than one child, where there's just a single computer.
Okay, thank you. Does it work on a Chromebook? My Mac works brilliantly. Another question from Rob. I don't know if you've had experience of a Chromebook with Teams. Anybody?
Personally, I haven't, but I can't see any reason why it wouldn't. The only thing you'll need to do is download the Teams app, and once you've downloaded the Teams app, that seems to be one of the keys to making everything work.
Or anything on that, Darren?
Or you can just go through the web. I'm not sure if it's just need to check on the facts for the Chromebook and whether the Teams app works fine on there, or if just using the going to the website for Teams, teams.microsoft.com, and signing in that way. So
great.
Obviously, the web app isn't as feature rich often as the full app, but it works fine.
Right. The way you can the next question, the way you can update the initials in the display name is quite simple, and Simon Ball has a very quick guide on how to do it. But basically, it's when you're logged into Unify, you click on your own name and it gives you the option to change your display name to anything that you want.
Thanks, Trevor.
Good one, thank you. Trevor, do you know where your teachers keep their resources? Are they in the cloud or kept locally?
This was another, probably going back now 3 years. We moved over to SharePoint, and we moved resources onto SharePoint, which I have to be honest, at the time was a very painful process. But that was because people didn't really embrace it to begin with. But once it was pointed out to them that it's a single file that they're storing, and that file can be worked on by like a curriculum group. It's date stamped. Any changes are recorded. Everybody then started to move their resources onto that, and we run SharePoint across the whole of the Trust network. So we have resources that basically are we've got the basic admin finance resources which serve the whole of the Trust. We have a primary group of resources, a secondary group of resources, and all of them are interchangeable. But it is about, the key to that is permissions, and making sure that the permissions are correct in SharePoint.
Thank you, Trevor. Question from Ben. Potential safeguarding privacy concerns has resulted in some hesitancy and uncertainty in implementing the widespread use of Teams and live lessons for us. How did you approach this and instill confidence in leadership teachers using the platform? So some issues about potential issues around safeguarding and privacy. Trevor, any insight there?
I think what we obviously set some very simple guidelines. So you know, like blurring your background or changing your background, which you can only do, by the way, if you're on a Mac or a PC. It doesn't work on iPad. You can only blur your background on iPad. Doing it with somebody for the first time, so that you've got somebody with you who you both share the experience, so it becomes less less concerning, and we then moved to the face-to-face meetings where we had staff come in and they did their face-to-face with their individuals in the classes. And I think it's just about building up people's confidence, making sure that the whole of the Teams works, and sharing other people's experiences as well.
Okay, good advice. Thank you. Question from Mike. So yeah, on the mobile phones, tablets in schools, that topic that you brought up earlier on. We only have a decent set of laptops in schools, so that would be a huge boost in terms of technology if there is a safe way to implement it. I don't know whether you're at that stage yet, Trevor, whether you've thought about the safe implementation. You know, if you were to lift that ban on mobile phones.
On the network, we do have BYOD, bring your own device.
Yeah.
And that is filtered through both Smoothwall and eSafe. So if they're using the mobile phones on the bring your own device network, it will flag up any concerns through eSafe straight away. And both of those pieces of software are key to keeping everything safe and in the right place.
Great, thank you. Does that mean there's no bulk way to do it? Each user has to do it manually. I think that refers back to a previous question, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the display name. Yeah. And I think it is a single person thing, isn't it, Trevor? I think that's
Yeah. We didn't. It's something that we didn't realise that Teams takes as a single point of trust the information that's sitting in your MIS. Now it might be different in SIMs. We don't operate SIMs. We operate Progresso, as it's now moved on to being called Cloud School, and the information that it was pulling from Cloud School was that Mr., Ms., or Mrs. And not only that, it creates a little bit of well, I don't want to be called Miss, I don't want to be called Mrs., which is fine. They've just got to do it. But it's very simple. It's literally go to RM Unify, click on your name, and change it.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm being told that we have exhausted all the questions now, so I think that's it for the Q&A. So it just remains for me to thank Trevor. Thanks again, Trevor, for joining us today. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Darren as well for helping out with the Q&A. And thank you for everybody for attending. I know everybody's really busy at the moment. This is the third in the series of these webinars, so we'll certainly look to inform you about what we'll be doing next. But in the meantime, as always, the webinar recording will be sent out to you all via an email, and you can see it on the website too. I did mention at the start that Trevor helped us out with a case study which talked about that journey to the cloud. It is perhaps 5 or 6 weeks old. Some things have moved on, Trevor was saying, since then, but a great reference point, and you can view that and have a read of that from our website. And then if you've got any further questions at all to do with anything to do with cloud or anything else technology related, then there's some contact details for you all there too. So I think we've got one final slide, which is to say that we leave this presentation running for about 5-10 minutes because we ask that you just respond to a very short survey. So we're going to leave that running in the background for you to do that. And once again, thank you everybody for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.